Alrighty everyone, welcome back. We only have 3 episodes left of The Acolyte, and so far it has been a total disaster for those like Disney, Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, Leslye Headland, and let's not forget about star Amandla Stenberg, who has done nothing but damage to, of course, the Star Wars fans and the Star Wars brand. We all know what she did in that music video, by the way, and what kind of ramifications she actually had to deal with behind the scenes over at Lucasfilm. We'll talk more about that later on in the week, but what's interesting about this has a lot to do with what's going on with the Acolyte in the midst of the ongoing backlash and what Kathleen Kennedy, as it turns out, did, of course, to the Disney executives. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You could also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So, episode 5, we know that there were basically 0 examples in here to validate poor writing, poor acting, poor storytelling. Just because you have a decent lightsaber fight, a decent series of lightsabers clashing against each other in the dark, does not actually compensate for everything else wrong with the Acolyte series, alright? The only thing good that came out of this episode, I will be very honest, is Manny Jacinto, I believe is his name. And his acting capability is the only thing that really stood out in that episode, and even that's not saying a lot for the series. The fact that this one is the best out of all so far is not a good sign at all, because we know that 6, 7, and 8 are going to be more or less of a drop-off if you're looking at the track record of other Star Wars shows. Now, focusing on all of this, we know that there's been a lot of things going on here with Kathleen Kennedy, with the Disney executives, and the financial disaster with the Acolyte series. Let's jump into this and exactly how it recently got worse. Now, with the Acolyte episode 5 already failing to reverse the backlash for Lucasfilm's sake, and deeply impacting those like Kathleen Kennedy and Leslye Headland, one major development now has much to do with Kathleen Kennedy and how she lost Disney millions of dollars, as it turns out, over the Acolyte behind the scenes, even more than we currently, of course, talked about not so long ago, and how there is more to the story over the current financial collapse with the Acolyte series. Now, one crucial update to this situation now involves more to do with what Kathleen Kennedy did that led to the Disney board of directors growing very frustrated with the overall production of this series. As it turns out, far more scenes were filmed altogether for the Acolyte episode 5 through 8 that ended up getting axed and deleted in the midst of post-production. It turns out a very expensive lightsaber duel that was filmed for the Acolyte episode 7 was completely cancelled by Kathleen Kennedy, since she felt it didn't focus on the female-driven characters too much after the editors put it all together, reportedly doing a subpar job, focusing on characters, of course, like May and Osha improperly. It turns out that this led to a series of drama-driven moments between Kathleen Kennedy and the Disney heads, where the scene just wasn't working with the extra footage that Kathleen Kennedy demanded beforehand that ended up going nowhere but locked in the vault at Lucasfilm. Also, a failed test screening of this particular episode of The Acolyte didn't work well as all. Now, this was reportedly a saber fight between Osha, May, and Chimere, and the entire scene reportedly cost $10 million in total to film, between the set design to the special effects and CGI that were used in the 10-minute long sequence. Now guys, let me be very specific yet again. $10 million for a scene, not for an episode. Let that sink in. Now, in addition to this, more footage budgeting, of course, funds that Kathleen Kennedy demanded before filming was over involved Kennedy requesting and demanding the Disney heads to pour in another $20 million into episode 8 for another lightsaber duel that they aimed to make the major cliffhanger or the grand finale at that for the show. The $20 million spent on this entire scene led to a series of poor test screenings over the show that led Disney executives to go into a state of panic over the grand finale of The Acolyte. This saber duel that was cancelled reportedly involved another mysterious villain, Manny Jacinto's, of course, character Chimere, Sol, Osha, and May. However, the entire sequence was cancelled due to both Kathleen Kennedy and Leslye Headland's failed usage of proper dialogue, storytelling, and character development that wasn't working at all with the Disney heads. Now, Disney executives reportedly knew the Acolyte was going to bring in a level of backlash not just catered to the agenda specifically, which is something that they support and stand by, but rather with the mess of the production and how much money they lost, which is now estimated to have been around $35 million of extra funds that were demanded by Kathleen Kennedy before post-production for these scenes that went absolutely nowhere. Now guys, let me just say one thing about this before I move on. This is typical Kathleen Kennedy behavior as of late. I don't know if you guys have been following all the financial situations related to a lot of the TV shows for Star Wars, like Book of Boba Fett, in this case The Acolyte, and especially The Mandalorian Season 3 and how she interfered with that with the last 3 episodes. Well, it's really not so shocking that she demanded Disney and said, oh, we need this amount of budgeting, we need to make the show work by making these scenes play out, and then she does a complete 180, she does a flip-flop, she does a bait and switch and says, yeah, these scenes aren't working, it's just not working for us, and the Disney executives had a big problem with that, and said, alright, you know what, to hell with it, just call it quits. And they lost tens of millions of dollars over those various episodes and those lightsaber duels just not working out at all. Now, how does this sound familiar? Well, it actually does with another Lucasfilm property, Indiana Jones. Alright, so a near similar thing also happened with Indiana Jones 5, The Dial of Destiny, with multiple scenes getting cancelled that involved de-aged Harrison Ford across 4 specific scenes that got axed. This brings the Acolyte's true budget to around $210 million, as opposed to $180 million, plus marketing expenses on top of that were cut back at last minute, by the way, by Bob Iger, that also, of course, came shortly after. Now look, we all know that Bob Iger really will never admit failure when it comes to Star Wars. In fact, he already did damage control over the Acolyte, claiming that it's nothing more than a minority of fans that have a problem with this, and even Kathleen Kennedy and Leslye Headland have done damage control, blaming toxic males and how it's so hard for women to really kind of create a career for themselves in the Star Wars world, which is not the case at all. You know, I think that they're beginning to really forget that we have had so many prime examples of women in the film industry that just worked perfectly. I don't have to go over all the examples, I always do, and I'm sure that you guys know exactly what characters I'm talking about in pop culture, but they seem to only stick to their narrative that there was never a female action star that really resonated with, you know, male fans or a male audience. And it really just goes to show you that it's all about their agenda, it's all about their message at the end of the day. And look, I know episode 5 was not so catered to the agenda this time, but it did have terrible writing, it did have terrible storytelling, the acting was just horrible as far as I'm concerned, with cringe moments like May cutting her hair with a lightsaber and looking up like she's breaking out of, you know, some kind of situation where she doesn't know where she is. I don't even know what was going on with that whole scenario and what they were really thinking with episode 5. It's as if they believe that those lightsaber duels are going to make up for the mess that was episodes 1 through 4, and it just really backfired. So overall, I would like to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.